We got a big time report on the NFL draft surrounding your Minnesota Vikings that we'll dive into on today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. So it was Alec Lewis writing up a recent article, and he was asked on the Vikings' plan for the 2026 NFL draft, and his answer was a bit of a shocker. This is what Alec had to say, saying this also explains why multiple league sources believe the Vikings will target defensive linemen and tackles early in the 2026 NFL draft. Cornerback and safety necessities too, but the Vikings cannot afford to proceed without a clear focus on these areas of their team, matching the focuses of their rivals in the NFC North. So I think the biggest shocker here was Alec mentioning that the Vikings could potentially target offensive tackles. So coming up on the show, we'll discuss should the Vikings target offensive tackle here, because obviously if you just look at it on paper, all right, you got Christian Darrisaw, you got Brian O'Neill, you would assume that the Vikings don't need an offensive lineman. But if you look into it a little more, and especially if you look at the other teams in the NFC North, maybe this is a position of need that a lot of us did not initially think heading into the draft. But you guys let me know your thoughts. What is the biggest position of need for the Minnesota Vikings? I still think it's a safety position. Then I'll still go cornerback number 2. But you guys chime in down below in the comment section. What is the biggest position of need for the Minnesota Vikings? All right, let's dive into it. So should the Vikings target tackle with the first-round pick in the NFL draft? Now, if you're just looking at it on paper, like I said, you see Christian Darrisaw, see Brian O'Neill, two of the better tackles in the National Football League, so you initially say no. But as we know, the Vikings are in cap hell this offseason, and they would save a boatload of money by just flat-out releasing Brian O'Neill. Now, I will say I don't expect this to be a move that the Vikings do end up making. Now, yes, you do save around $16 million. I mean, you'd only be taking on $3 million of dead cap, and you'd be saving $19.5 million. So that is a ton of money the Vikings could save, but Brian O'Neill had a fantastic season. I would just rather have the Vikings maybe extend O'Neill's contract, push that money down the line, and still keep this Super Bowl window open for the next couple of seasons. But I don't think it's about O'Neill. I think it's about Christian Darrisaw. And you may be saying, Patrick, that's ludicrous. Darrisaw, when he's fully healthy, he's legitimately a top 5 left tackle in the league, and obviously left tackle, a premium position in the NFL when you're trying to build a complete roster. But on Darrisaw this past season, he was in and out of the lineup, still rehabbing from that torn ACL, MCL, and even when he was out there, he wasn't the same guy. This is not a small sample size. It was 500 snaps this past season where he was middle of the pack at the offensive tackle position. PFF graded him out 47th overall, 37th in pass block, 33rd in run block, which the Darrisaw standard is definitely a step back. And Kevin O'Connell talked about Darrisaw and his availability during his end of the season presser, and he was clearly frustrated with Darrisaw's availability this season. He wasn't saying, frustrated with, potentially, Darrisaw and saying, he's not doing enough to get back out there on the football field, but just from a game planning perspective, when you have Darrisaw in the lineup, that opens up the entire playbook compared to when you had a guy like Justin School. Now, I could also make the argument maybe the Vikings should have targeted a swing tackle a little bit more, considering the injury Darrisaw was coming off of a torn ACL, MCL. And also, I still remember the quote when Brian O'Neill was showing Donovan Jackson a lot of love, talking about him battling through that wrist injury. And he was saying, I love guys that can play through injuries, who can, pretty much lay it all out there on the football field. And I wonder if that was a kind of a backhanded jab at Christian Darrisaw. Don't want to speculate too much, but maybe it was. Now, I can also make the argument the Vikings eventually need to find a Brian O'Neill replacement. Now, we have seen offensive tackles play until they're 35, 36 years old, but Brian O'Neill is getting up there in age, and with the savings the Vikings could have on the cap, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they just flat out cut him, save that $16 million, and they go find that replacement in the NFL draft. Very, very unlikely, but you never know, because the Vikings, they are strapped for cash. They are $40 million in the hole, and if you would just want to kind of take a big chunk in that and maybe get into the green with one move, cutting Brian O'Neill could definitely be on the table. I think it's unlikely, but I'm not shocked getting this report that the Vikings could target offensive tackle in the draft. Also because of this, the NFC North got some stacked edge rushers. Aiden Hutchinson, top 5 edge rusher in the league. Micah Parsons, top 5 edge rusher in the league. If you want to win this division, you need to have your tackle position shored up, and you need to have both your tackles out there and available. Because next year, if you're taking on the Lions or if you're taking on the Packers, and maybe Christian Darrisaw is out or maybe Brian O'Neill is out, that's a tough place to be as an offense, considering both these guys can line up on the left side, they can line up on the right side, and if you have a weak spot in your offensive line, I mean, we saw the game that Micah had against the Vikings in Lambeau this past season. He absolutely game-wrecked that game. So there are elite edge rushers. You have some uncertainty at the tackles, even though if it's just on paper and we're playing, Madden Ultimate Team, you would feel confident in the Vikings tackles, but that just wasn't really the case this past season. And also, I wouldn't be shocked if the Chicago Bears go out there and try to go all in on a premium all-pro edge rusher, and that could possibly be Max Crosby. Maybe they try to go out there and sign a guy like Trey Hendrickson, or maybe sign Khalil Mack, bring him back to Chicago. But the Bears' number one priority this offseason is going to be getting better at getting to the quarterback. So I think they're going to be ultra aggressive. So that's why I'm not shocked that the Vikings are potentially targeting tackle early on in this draft. But if you guys could hit that thumbs up icon for us. We got challenged here by actually our Packers Report channel. They're talking some noise saying we couldn't hit 500 likes. So if you guys could help me out, go down there, smash that thumbs up icon for us. It's a free, easy way to help us out here on the channel. So hit that thumbs up icon, and let's see if we can get to 500 likes on today's show. All right, so I do want to talk about the 2026 NFL Draft coming up here in just a second. Dive into 5 names that the Vikings could potentially draft with that 18th overall pick. So we'll discuss that here in just a second. But before we do so, I do want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. And the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get in to the football action before next season. So close the season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you put your first $5. Now, Prize Picks also allows you to find your community with the new social feeds feature. You can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade our picks with just one click. They also have a brand new feature called Early Payouts. So if your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. So download the Prize Picks app today. Plug in promo code CLNS. Get hooked up with that $50 instantly in lineups after you put your first $5 lineup. That's promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you put your first $5 lineup. But shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, so let's talk about these offensive tackles here. And it's actually a pretty good tackle draft if the Vikings do decide to go in that direction. There's actually 2 guys out of Utah who played some great football this past season. First one, Spencer Faenow, had a really good season. Big body. He moves incredibly well. Kind of does remind me, actually, of a Brian O'Neill on the offensive line. So that could be an easy replacement. And here are his PFF grades from this past season. He was 11th in the country overall, 30th in pass block, 14th in run block. But this guy's a big body, likes to get downhill. He would kind of fit the mold of a Vikings tackle where they like to move these guys out in space. Very, very athletic. So maybe he'll be there at pick number 18. I have my doubts on that. But if he somehow falls there and the Vikings just want to go BPA at that spot, I think he could be a good option. But how about his teammate, Caleb Lumu, another Utah tackle here. Now, this guy, he wasn't obviously as good this past season as Faenow was, but he's still very, very solid. And he's more of a true pass blocker. Like, he allowed, I think it was like the 3rd least amount of pressures out of all major out of all Power 5 conference offensive tackles this past season. But, he moves pretty well too. And, I think this would be a little bit of a reach for the Vikings to take him at pick number 18. But both these Utah tackles are going to go high in this draft. Probably both be first-round picks. And he could potentially be out there. But a guy I would be a massive fan of the Vikings drafting. And this is Caden Proctor. Now, heading into the season, Caden Proctor was going to be a top 5 pick. Now, a lot of these mock drafts will have him around maybe the 11th to 27th range, kind of in the meat and potatoes of the first round. And he had a really good year for Bama. Now, was it up to the standard that he set for himself the year prior? Not necessarily, but this guy still was graded out as the 9th best offensive tackle in the country. And what I love about this guy, like Alabama, they would throw him screens at certain spots this year. He's incredibly athletic. There has been a little bit of some Penei Sewell comps for him. Obviously, Penei was like a true blue chip prospect, like a can't miss guy. Like, Penei, Joe Alt, like those were the 2 guys we've seen recently coming out of the draft. But hey, Caden Proctor, if he can live up to who we thought he was before the season, and he's there at 18, and you just want to take a flyer on him, and then it's like, hey, we got Caden Proctor for the future at the right tackle spot. Darrisaw, Donovan Jackson, Will Fries. Then we just need to find that center of the future. I would have some interest in that as well. But how about another SEC tackle here, Monroe Freeling, the Georgia offensive tackle. This guy's got some good versatility as well. I will say, anytime I watch Georgia, this guy was just a stone cold, just like, hey, I'm not allowing anything to happen. And, he played some really good football. Graded out 77th overall. And, this guy's a big body as well. Comes in here I had this pulled up here in just a second. But he's a big body. Let me just pull this up here. Yeah, 6'7", 315 pounds. This guy's an absolute mammoth of a human being. So, again, if you want to add some more physicality to your offensive line, Monroe Freeland's another guy. But how about a Northwestern guy, Caleb Tiernan? You can follow suit of Rashawn Slater here as the good pipeline that Northwestern has coming out in the NFL draft. This guy's also a big body as well, 6'7", 330 pounds. He's 22 years old. Played with Northwestern his entire collegiate career. He was an all Big Ten second team this past season. He started all 13 games, so he was very healthy. Again, more of a true pass blocking offensive tackle, and we'll see these guys fall and drop throughout the entire draft. This is probably a guy that I think will probably go more towards the second round. So if the Vikings want to take a chance there, could be on the table. But hey, if you guys made it to the end of today's show, interesting article by Alec Lewis saying the Vikings could target tackle. And now we will have video coming out later today talking about Brian Flores potentially heading to the freaking Green Bay Packers. So we'll talk about that there. But appreciate all of you guys watching. If you guys made it to the end, give me a Skull Vikes down below. And we'll see you guys next time. Skull Vikes.